The moment my ex-husband saw the laptop, his face went white. That was when I realized the affair with my sister was not the real secret. The real secret was hidden in a second bank account, and my mother had helped him keep it from me. Hi, my name is Lauren, I'm 37 years old, and I still remember the smell of that pie. Before I tell you what happened on Thanksgiving, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and stay until the end, because this story taught me never to confuse family with safety. I drove to my mother's house in a Columbus suburb with a pumpkin pie on the passenger seat. I had baked it almost all night because I wanted to do at least one thing right. After the divorce, I had avoided family holidays for a long time, but my mother had been calling me for 3 straight weeks. She spoke softly, almost guiltily, as if she had really changed. "Lauren, this year will be different," she said. "I just want to stitch the family back together." That phrase hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I was 37, but around my mother, I sometimes still felt like a child waiting to finally be chosen. So I bought the best spices, pulled out my grandmother's old recipe, and decided to try. When I parked in front of the house, several cars were already in the driveway. My father's old pickup wasn't there, because after he died, my mother had sold it. In its place was a shiny black BMW, far too familiar for my peace of mind. I froze, holding the pie box on my lap. My ex-husband, Brian, drove that exact kind of car. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Plenty of people in our town had black BMWs. I even laughed, but the laugh came out dry and foreign. Then I saw the little scratch near the rear light. I had made it myself with my keys when I dropped my purse a year earlier. My chest tightened, as if someone had pulled a belt around it. I could have turned around, driven home, and turned off my phone. But my mother was standing in the kitchen window, and she had already seen me. She raised her hand and smiled, as if nothing strange was happening. So I took the pie, grabbed my purse, and walked to the door. The house smelled like turkey, butter, and cinnamon. Laughter drifted from the living room, that forced family cheer that always hides something ugly. My mother met me near the entrance with a smile that was much too wide. "Oh, sweetheart, you came," she said, quickly kissing my cheek. Her hands were shaking when she took the pie from me. I wanted to ask about the car, but I didn't get the chance. Brian's voice came from the living room. Low, calm, confident. The same voice he once used to tell me I was too suspicious. I walked in and saw him sitting on the couch. Beside him sat my younger sister, Emily. She held a glass of wine with both hands, but she wouldn't look at me. Her dark hair was styled in a way she had never worn it before. She was wearing a cream-colored dress, expensive and far too festive for a family dinner. Then I saw the ring. It glittered on her finger so boldly that the whole room seemed to tilt. It wasn't just any ring. It was the same design Brian had once shown me in a jewelry store. I remembered the thin band, the small diamonds on the sides, and the oval center stone. He had told me that kind of ring would only suit me. My mother clapped her hands as if she were announcing dessert. "I know this isn't ideal," she said. "But love has to be accepted when it comes." The room became so quiet that I could hear my own breathing. Aunt Marcia lowered her eyes to her plate. My cousin pretended to read something on his phone. Brian was the first to stand, wearing that same careful smile he always used in front of other people. "Lauren, we didn't want you to find out this way," he said. Emily finally looked at me, and there was no shame in her eyes. There was fear, but not regret. My mother stepped closer and placed her hand on my shoulder. "Be an adult," she whispered. "Today isn't about you." That was when I understood they had planned everything. They had put me in a room full of relatives so I couldn't scream. They had brought my humiliation to the holiday table and decorated it with cranberry sauce. But there was one thing they didn't know. There was a flash drive in my purse. On it was footage from the camera outside our old house. I had found it by accident when I was picking up my last things after the sale. And on that footage, you could see who had been coming to see Brian at night, while I was still carrying his last name. I slowly placed my purse on the chair. Then I looked at my mother, my sister, and my ex-husband. And for the first time that day, I smiled. My smile made the room colder than any scream could have. Brian's face changed first. It was small, almost invisible, but I knew him too well. His mouth stayed relaxed, yet his eyes sharpened like he had heard glass break somewhere behind him. Emily noticed it too. She looked from him to me, then down at her ring, as if that diamond had suddenly become too heavy for her hand. My mother squeezed my shoulder harder, warning me without saying a word. I gently removed her hand. "Congratulations," I said. My voice sounded calm, but inside, everything was shaking. My stomach twisted so badly I thought I might drop right there on the carpet. Still, I kept my face steady, because that was what they had counted on me not being able to do. They expected tears. They expected rage. They expected me to become the unstable ex-wife they could all whisper about later. Instead, I walked to the dining room and placed my purse on the chair beside mine. The flash drive was in the inner pocket, wrapped in a grocery receipt from that morning. It felt ridiculous that something so small could hold enough truth to destroy the room. Mom followed me, moving fast in her holiday apron. "Lauren," she whispered, "please don't make this ugly." I turned to her slowly. "You invited my ex-husband to Thanksgiving," I said. "With my sister. Wearing an engagement ring." Her face tightened, but she didn't look ashamed. That hurt more than anything. "I invited my daughter," she said. "And Emily deserves happiness too." The words landed so cleanly that I almost laughed. Emily deserved happiness. Brian deserved forgiveness. Mom deserved a peaceful holiday. Somehow, I was the only person in that house expected to deserve nothing. From the living room, Brian cleared his throat. "Maybe we should talk privately," he said. That was the first time I heard fear under his voice. A year earlier, during our divorce, he had told everyone I was paranoid. He said I checked his phone because I was insecure. He said I imagined things because I could not accept that our marriage had simply failed. For months, I had believed parts of it. That is the strange thing about being lied to by someone you love. You do not just doubt them. You start doubting your own memory, your own body, your own warning signs. I had apologized for asking questions that deserved answers. I had cried in a lawyer's office because I thought maybe I had destroyed my own marriage with suspicion. Then, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I found the video. I had gone back to our old house to meet the real estate agent. The sale was almost finished, and she needed me to clear the garage shelves. In a dusty box near the breaker panel, I found the little home security hub Brian had forgotten to remove. At first, I almost threw it away. Then I remembered the nights he claimed he was working late. The porch light turning on after midnight. The smell of Emily's vanilla perfume in our hallway, the one she swore she only wore on special occasions. So I plugged it in. The camera footage had not saved everything. Most of it was gone, overwritten by months of quiet driveways and passing headlights. But one folder remained, marked by a date I would never forget. February 9th. The night after my birthday. On that video, Emily walked up our front steps at 1:14 in the morning. She wore a gray coat I had bought her for Christmas. Brian opened the door before she knocked, like he had been waiting behind it. She stepped inside. He kissed her before the door closed. I watched that clip 6 times without blinking. Not because I needed proof, but because my heart refused to understand what my eyes already knew. My sister had not fallen in love with him after our divorce. She had been there before it. Now she sat in my mother's living room, wearing a ring that looked like a joke God had told too quietly. Aunt Marcia came into the dining room holding a serving spoon she clearly did not need. Her eyes softened when she saw me. "Sweetheart," she said carefully. "Maybe eat something first." That almost broke me. Not Brian. Not Emily. Not even my mother. It was my aunt offering mashed potatoes as if food could cover betrayal. I glanced toward the hallway, where the family TV sat above the fireplace. Brian followed my eyes, and this time, his careful smile disappeared completely. "Lauren," he said again, lower now. "Do not do this here." Emily stood so quickly her wine almost spilled. "Do what?" she asked. That was when I understood something new. She didn't know about the video. Brian had not told her there was proof. He had probably promised her the same thing he promised me once, that everything could be managed, explained, softened, controlled. My mother looked between us, confused for the first time all afternoon. "What is going on?" she asked. I reached into my purse and felt the edge of the flash drive through the receipt. My fingers closed around it, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath. Then Brian took one step toward me. And Emily whispered, "What did you find?" Emily's question hung in the dining room like smoke. "What did you find?" Nobody moved after she said it. Even the kitchen timer seemed too loud, ticking toward an overcooked turkey while my family stood around a secret that had already begun to rot. Brian looked at her sharply. "Emily, don't," he said. That tiny command told me more than any confession could have. He was not worried about my feelings. He was worried about losing control of the story before dinner even started. My mother's face went pale. "Lauren," she said, trying to sound firm. "Put whatever that is away." I pulled the flash drive from my purse and held it between two fingers. It looked cheap and ordinary, the kind of thing you forget in a drawer. But Brian stared at it like it was a loaded weapon. Aunt Marcia whispered my name. I almost stopped. For 1 weak second, I imagined placing it back in my purse. I imagined eating dry turkey beside my sister, pretending her ring did not feel like a slap. I imagined letting Mom keep her peaceful holiday, because that was what I had been trained to do. Keep quiet. Stay polite. Swallow the hurt so nobody else feels uncomfortable. Then Emily lifted her hand to her chest, and the ring flashed again under the dining room light. Something inside me settled. Not exploded. Not snapped. Settled. "No," I said. "I think everyone should know what they're celebrating." Brian stepped closer, but my cousin Daniel moved first. He had been silent all afternoon, sitting half-hidden by the window with his phone in his hand. Now he stood between us, not dramatically, just enough to make Brian stop. "Back up," Daniel said. Brian's jaw tightened. "This is between me and Lauren." Emily let out a small, bitter laugh. "It stopped being between you two when you asked me to marry you." Her voice shook on the last words, and for the first time, I saw her as more than the person who had betrayed me. I saw a woman who had believed she was chosen, not used. That did not excuse her. Nothing could. But it changed the shape of the room. Mom crossed her arms over her apron. "I will not have some ugly accusation ruin Thanksgiving," she said. "Then maybe you shouldn't have invited the accusation to dinner," I replied. That made Aunt Marcia cough into her napkin. Under different circumstances, I might have laughed. But my fingers were trembling too badly as I walked toward the television. The TV sat above the fireplace, surrounded by framed family photos. There was one of Emily and me at Lake Erie when we were teenagers, sunburned and laughing. Beside it was a wedding photo of Brian and me, still hanging there like my divorce had been a scheduling mistake. I plugged the flash drive into the side port. Brian cursed under his breath. Mom gasped like that was the real problem. The screen took forever to load. A blue menu appeared, then a folder with one date stamped across it. February 9th. Emily's lips parted. "That's not after the divorce," she whispered. No one answered her. I clicked the file. The footage was grainy, black and white, and painfully clear. Our old front porch appeared on the screen. Snow lined the steps. My wreath was still on the door because I had been too exhausted after my birthday to take it down. At 1:14 a.m., Emily walked into the frame. She wore the gray coat I had given her for Christmas. Behind me, someone sucked in a breath. I did not turn around. I watched my sister climb the steps, watched Brian open the door before she knocked, watched him pull her inside like this was routine. Then came the kiss. It was not confused. It was not new. It was comfortable. Emily made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not quite a sob, not quite a gasp. Brian started talking fast, saying her name, saying mine, saying words like context and complicated. But nobody was looking at him anymore. They were looking at the date. They were looking at the truth. And then Emily turned to Brian, slowly raised her shaking hand, and asked the one question I had not expected. "How long before that night?" Emily's question changed everything. How long before that night? Brian opened his mouth, but nothing useful came out. For once, he did not have a polished answer ready. He looked at my mother first, then at me, as if one of us might rescue him from the silence. Nobody did. Emily's hand was still raised between them, the ring catching every bit of light in the room. Her face looked empty now, like someone had pulled the holiday mask right off her skin. "Brian," she said. "How long?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "That video doesn't show the whole story." I almost laughed, because men like Brian loved that sentence. When the truth was plain, they suddenly needed context. When they were caught, every betrayal became a misunderstanding with better lighting. Emily took one step back. "That was February 9th, she said. "You told me you were separated then." My stomach dropped. Separated. That word hit harder than I expected. Not because I believed him, but because I suddenly saw the shape of his lie. He had not just betrayed me with my sister. He had fed her a softer version, one where I was already gone, already cold, already impossible to love. I turned toward her. "Emily, I was living in that house," I said. "My birthday party was the night before." Her eyes flickered. "I know," she whispered. The room went painfully still. "You know?" I asked. She swallowed, and for the first time, shame reached her face. "I mean, I knew you were still there sometimes," she said. "He told me you were sleeping in the guest room. He said the marriage was over." Mom suddenly moved between us, like she could block the truth with her body. "That is enough," she snapped. "This is not helping anyone." Daniel looked at her in disbelief. "Grandma, are you serious? I am trying to keep this family from falling apart." That sentence made something cold open inside me. For years, those words had been her excuse for everything. Keeping the family together meant ignoring Dad's drinking. It meant pretending Emily's selfishness was just sensitivity. It meant asking me to apologize whenever I reacted to being hurt. Now it meant serving turkey beside the man who had slept with both her daughters. "This family is already apart," I said. "You just decorated the pieces." Brian finally stepped toward Emily. "I was confused," he said. "I loved Lauren, but we were miserable. You made me feel alive again." Emily stared at him like he had spoken in another language. "You told me she trapped you," she said. Aunt Marcia covered her mouth. There it was. The lie underneath the lie. He had not only cheated. He had rewritten me into a villain so my own sister could feel innocent while taking my place. He had made my pain into a cage, my questions into cruelty, my marriage into something he survived. And Emily had wanted to believe him. Because believing him made betrayal feel like rescue. "This is crazy," I said quietly. The words slipped out before I could stop them. But they were true. It was crazy that my mother thought this could be handled with manners. It was crazy that my sister wore a ring chosen from my old dreams. It was crazy that Brian still stood there, trying to manage our faces like a salesman with a bad contract. Then my mother said something I will never forget. "Lauren, you need to understand your part in this." For a second, I could not breathe. "My part?" "You were always difficult with him," she said. "Suspicious. Emotional. A man can only take so much pressure." The room blurred around the edges. That was the moment I realized my mother had not invited me to heal anything. She had invited me to surrender. She wanted me to bless their engagement, absorb the humiliation, and prove her version of peace still worked. Emily turned on her. "Mom, stop." But Mom did not stop. "She deserves to hear it," she said. Maybe if she had been softer, none of this would have happened. I looked at Brian. He looked relieved. That tiny relief told me he had heard this before. Maybe not today. Maybe not in these exact words. But my mother had already helped him build a story where I caused my own betrayal. I pulled the flash drive from the television. My hands were steady now. "You all can eat without me," I said. Mom's eyes widened. "Lauren, don't you dare walk out and make everyone uncomfortable." I picked up my purse. "No," I said. "You made everyone comfortable with a lie. I'm just leaving with the truth." I was halfway to the front door when Emily called after me. "Lauren, wait." I stopped, but I did not turn around. Her voice broke behind me. "There's something else you need to know." I stopped with my hand on the front door. Emily's voice had cracked in a way I had not heard since we were kids. Back then, she only sounded like that when she knew she had broken something beyond repair. I turned slowly. She stood near the fireplace, pale and shaking, with Brian reaching for her arm. She pulled away before he touched her. That small movement made his face harden. "What else?" I asked. Emily looked at Mom first. That was when I felt the floor shift under me. My mother did not look confused anymore. She looked afraid. Not shocked, not disappointed, but afraid in a practical way, like someone watching a secret crawl toward daylight. Brian noticed too. "Emily," he said quietly. "Think very carefully." She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "I did think carefully," she said. That was the problem. Mom stepped forward. "This is not the time." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You mean this is not the time for Lauren to find out you knew?" The whole room went silent. I could hear the heat clicking through the vents. Somewhere in the kitchen, the turkey timer finally beeped, sharp and ridiculous. Nobody moved to turn it off. I stared at my mother. "You knew." Mom pressed her lips together. It was not that simple. Those 5 words burned more than the video. Not that simple. That was what people said when they wanted their betrayal to sound mature. It was what cowards used when the truth was too ugly to say plainly. My mother had known my husband was seeing my sister while I was still married to him, and she had invited me here anyway. Emily wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "She found out in March," she said. "After he came to her house." Brian shook his head. "Do not twist this." "I am done protecting you," Emily said. Then she looked at me, and for the first time that day, she looked younger than me. Not innocent. Just small. "He told Mom you were unstable," she said. "He said you were threatening to ruin his career. He said I was the only person who understood him." I felt a cold laugh rise in my throat. Of course he did. Brian worked as a regional sales director for a medical equipment company. His image mattered more to him than truth ever had. During our divorce, he fought harder over his reputation than our house, our savings, or the dog he once swore he loved. Mom folded her arms. "I was trying to prevent a disaster." "No," I said. "You were choosing which daughter's pain was easier to ignore." That landed. I saw it hit her face, but pride caught it before guilt could. "You always make yourself the victim," she said. Daniel finally turned off the kitchen timer. The silence after it stopped felt even worse. Emily took off the ring. She did it slowly, like the metal had grown into her skin. Brian watched her with panic spreading across his face. Don't be dramatic," he said. That word made her flinch. Dramatic. He had used it on me for years. Whenever I cried, I was dramatic. Whenever I asked for respect, I was dramatic. Whenever I noticed a lie, I was dramatic. Now he had handed the same label to my sister, like a coat passed from one woman to another. Emily placed the ring on the mantel, beside my wedding photo. The image was so cruel I almost looked away. "I can't marry you," she whispered. Brian's face changed again. The softness disappeared completely. "You're making a mistake," he said. "No," she replied. The mistake already happened. For one strange second, I thought that might be the end of it. The truth was out. The ring was off. Dinner was ruined. Maybe betrayal had finally run out of rooms to hide in. Then Brian looked at me. His eyes were flat now. "You think that flash drive makes you safe?" he asked. My skin went cold. Aunt Marcia gasped. Daniel stepped closer to him again. Mom said Brian's name, but even she sounded uncertain. I held my purse tighter. What is that supposed to mean? Brian smiled, but it was not the public smile anymore. It was the private one, the one I used to see after guests left and doors locked. "It means you should check what else you signed during the divorce," he said. My breath caught. Because suddenly I remembered the stack of papers. The rushed meeting. The way he kept saying I was dragging things out. The way Mom told me to stop being bitter and just sign. And for the first time that day, the betrayal was not only emotional. It had a price tag. The room seemed to shrink around Brian's words. "You should check what else you signed during the divorce." For a moment, nobody understood what he meant. Then my mother looked away, and that single movement told me enough. She knew something. Maybe not all of it, but enough to avoid my eyes. I turned toward her. "What did he make me sign?" Mom lifted her chin, but her voice came out thin. "You were exhausted, Lauren." Everyone was exhausted. That is not an answer. Brian adjusted his cuff like we were in a meeting. "You wanted it over," he said. I helped make that happen. I remembered that day too clearly now. His lawyer's office. The cheap coffee. The rain hitting the windows. Mom sitting beside me, whispering that fighting would only make me look bitter. I had been so tired. Tired of sleeping 3 hours a night. Tired of crying in parking lots. Tired of being told my pain was making everyone uncomfortable. So when they pushed the folder toward me, I signed where the sticky notes pointed. I thought I was signing freedom. Now I wondered if I had signed away my own future. What was in those papers? I asked. Brian smiled. The house proceeds were handled legally. My stomach dropped. The house. We had sold it 2 months after the divorce. I had received a check, but it was smaller than I expected. Brian said closing costs had eaten more than planned. I had been too broken to argue. My mother told me money was not worth more fighting. Emily stared at him. You told me you split everything fairly. I did, he snapped. No, I said quietly. You split it the way you explained it to me. Daniel pulled out his phone. My friend's a paralegal, he said. Lauren, send me anything you have. Mom reacted too fast. Daniel, stay out of this. That was when I finally understood. This was not just a messy family betrayal. It was a machine. Brian had lied. Emily had believed what helped her sleep. Mom had pressed her hands over every crack because silence was easier than accountability. And I had been the convenient person to drain. I looked at my mother. You told me to sign, I said. Her mouth trembled, but she still tried to stand tall. I told you to move on. No. You told me I was embarrassing the family. You told me a good woman does not fight over money. Aunt Marcia whispered, oh Linda. Mom's eyes flashed. Do not judge me. I was trying to keep peace. That word again. Peace. It had cost me my marriage, my money, my confidence, and almost my mind. Peace, in my family, always meant one person bleeding quietly so everyone else could eat dinner. Brian took a step toward the door. I'm not discussing legal matters at Thanksgiving. Daniel blocked him again. You were fine announcing an engagement at Thanksgiving. Brian's face hardened. Emily picked up the ring from the mantel and held it out to him. Her fingers shook, but her voice did not. Take it. He stared at her. Emily. Take it, Brian. For the first time, he looked cornered. Not sorry. Not ashamed. Just cornered. He took the ring from her palm and shoved it into his pocket. Then he leaned close to me. You always needed to win, he said. I looked at the man I once loved, and something inside me finally went quiet. Not because the hurt disappeared. It did not. It was still there, deep and raw. But the fear around it began to loosen. I did not need to win, I said. I needed the truth. His jaw twitched. You have no idea what you're starting. Maybe that threat would have broken me a year earlier. Maybe I would have apologized, softened my voice, asked him not to be angry. But this time, I had witnesses. I had the flash drive. I had my cousin already texting someone who knew the law. Most importantly, I had heard myself speak without shaking. Brian grabbed his coat from the chair. Mom followed him with desperate eyes. Brian, please, she said. This can still be handled. He laughed under his breath. You already handled it, Linda. Then he walked out. The front door slammed so hard the wreath shook against the glass. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Emily sank onto the couch and covered her face. Aunt Marcia stood near the kitchen, crying quietly into a napkin. Daniel kept typing on his phone. My mother looked at me like I had ruined her house. But for the first time in my life, her disappointment did not feel like a command. I picked up my purse, slid the flash drive back inside, and walked toward the dining table. The turkey was drying out. The gravy had formed a skin. My pumpkin pie sat untouched in its box. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I opened it with cold fingers. There was no name, no greeting, only one sentence. Ask Brian about the second account. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Ask Brian about the second account. For a second, I thought it had to be spam. Some strange coincidence, some scam text landing in the middle of the worst Thanksgiving of my life. But my body knew better before my mind accepted it. This was not random. Daniel saw my face change. Lauren, what is it? He asked. I turned the phone toward him. He read the message twice, then looked up at me. Do you know who sent that? I shook my head, but one name had already entered my mind. Karen Webb. She had been our closing agent when the house sold. I remembered her careful eyes, her quiet voice, the way she paused before sliding one paper toward me. At the time, I thought she felt sorry for me. Now I wondered if she had been trying to warn me. Emily stood from the couch, still pale, still ringless. "What second account?" she asked. My mother made a sound under her breath. It was small, but I heard it. I turned toward her. "You know about this too?" She gripped the back of a dining chair. I do not know what that message means. But she said it too quickly. That was the thing about my mother. She could lie with perfect grammar, but she could never control the speed. Truth made her slow. Fear made her fast. Daniel gently took my phone. "I'm calling my paralegal friend," he said. "And you are not deleting anything." I was not going to. "I know," he said softly. "But scared people do strange things." Across the room, Emily wiped her eyes. "I have his laptop at my apartment," she said. Everyone looked at her. "He left it there last night," she continued. "He said he needed me to print the engagement announcement cards." The room went still again. Engagement announcement cards. He had prepared this like a campaign. Not a proposal. Not love. A public relations move, wrapped in family pressure and holiday food. He wanted witnesses, photos, sympathy, a whole table of people helping him rewrite history. And my mother had offered him the stage. I looked at Emily, and anger rose hard in my chest. But beneath it was something heavier. Exhaustion. She had betrayed me, yes. She had believed him because believing him served her. Still, she was standing in the wreckage now, holding one piece of truth I needed. "Can you get it?" I asked. She nodded quickly. "I'll go now." Mom stepped in front of her. "You are not leaving this house to steal a man's computer." Emily stared at her. "He threatened Lauren." "He is angry," Mom said. "People say things when they are hurt." That sentence almost made me lose control. "Hurt?" I asked. "He stole my marriage, maybe my money, and definitely my peace." Mom's eyes filled, but tears no longer moved me automatically. "You do not understand what it was like," she said. The words came out broken this time. Not sharp. Broken. What was what like? She looked toward the front window, where Brian's car had vanished from the driveway. "After your father died," she whispered. "The house, the bills, the debt. Brian helped me." My stomach tightened. Daniel lowered his phone slowly. "What kind of help?" Mom closed her eyes. "He said he could move money around. Just temporarily." Aunt Marcia stepped forward. "Linda, what did you do?" My mother opened her eyes, and the shame finally reached them. "I signed something too." The room tilted. For a few seconds, nobody breathed. My mother, the woman who told me good women did not fight over money, had signed something with my ex-husband behind my back. Maybe she had not just protected him because she liked peace. Maybe she protected him because she was trapped too. Emily whispered, "Mom, what did you sign?" "I don't know," she said. "Not really." That answer would have sounded pathetic yesterday. Now it sounded dangerous. I suddenly imagined Brian collecting signatures like trophies. Mine. My mother's. Maybe Emily's next. A clean little chain of women he could pressure, shame, and use. My phone buzzed again in Daniel's hand. He looked down, then his face changed. "It's the same number," he said. He showed me the screen. "He's on his way to Emily's apartment. Don't let him reach the laptop first." Daniel did not wait for anyone's permission. He grabbed his keys, handed my phone back to me, and said, "We're going now." Emily was already moving toward the door. Her hands shook so badly she dropped her coat twice before getting it on. I followed her, not because I trusted her, but because Brian had taught me one painful thing. Secrets moved fast when money was involved. My mother called my name as we left. For the first time in my life, I did not turn around. Daniel drove while Emily called her building manager and asked him not to let Brian inside. Her voice broke halfway through the call, but she kept talking. That mattered. She was scared, embarrassed, and guilty, but she was finally choosing the truth while it still cost her something. When we reached her apartment complex, Brian's BMW was already in the visitor lot. My stomach went cold. We found him at her door, pounding with the side of his fist. The moment he saw us, his face changed into that calm public mask again. "This is ridiculous," he said. "I just need my laptop." Daniel held up his phone. "The police are already on the way." Brian laughed, but his eyes moved toward the stairs. Emily stepped in front of me. "You're not getting it," she said. That was the first brave thing I had ever seen her do for me. The laptop was on her kitchen table, still open beside a stack of cream-colored announcement cards. My name was nowhere on those cards, of course. In Brian's clean little version of the future, I had already disappeared. But inside that laptop, he had forgotten one open folder. It was labeled Closing. Daniel's paralegal friend talked us through what to save. We did not dig for drama. We copied documents, emails, and bank confirmations. There it was, hidden under boring file names and clean PDFs. A second account. Part of the house money had been routed through a business account Brian controlled. My signature had approved more than I understood, but the emails showed he had known exactly what I did not know. Worse, there were messages between him and my mother where she asked if Lauren would ever find out. I read that sentence 3 times. Each time, it hurt differently. The police arrived before Brian could leave the parking lot. They did not drag him away like a movie. Real life is colder than that. They took statements. They told us to call an attorney. Brian stood under the yellow hallway light, looking smaller than I remembered. By Monday morning, I had a lawyer. By January, a forensic accountant had found enough to force a settlement. Brian repaid money I thought was gone forever. His company opened an internal review after the documents surfaced. I never knew how much he lost, and eventually I stopped needing that answer. Emily called me every week. For months, I did not pick up. Then one day I did. She cried. I listened. I did not forgive her that day because forgiveness is not a button you press to make other people comfortable. But I let her start telling the truth without rewarding herself for it. My mother was harder. She sent letters at first, then voicemails, then one small envelope with a check and a note. The note only said, "I helped hurt you because I was afraid." It was the first honest sentence she had ever given me. I kept the note. I did not cash the check. That Thanksgiving night, after the police left, Daniel bought gas station coffee and 3 plastic forks. We sat in his car outside Emily's building and ate my pumpkin pie from the box. It was cold by then, a little soggy at the crust, and somehow still the best thing I had tasted all day. I had walked into my mother's house hoping to be accepted. I walked out understanding something much more valuable. Peace is not real when it requires your silence. Love is not love when it asks you to shrink. And family is not a safe place just because people share your blood and know your childhood nickname. Sometimes the door you close on Thanksgiving is the first honest home you ever build. And sometimes, the smallest thing in your purse can save your whole life.